Welcome back to Grounded. Oh, Aaron, it feels so good to say that after 2 weeks away. Grounded is a podcast and a video cast produced by Revive Our Hearts. I'm Dana Gresh.
Dana, it feels good to hear you say it. We missed you. Grounded is not the same without you. And I want to hear all about your trip. If you're a Grounded regular, you know Dana has been on an exciting trip. But for now, let me just tell everybody watching I'm Aaron Davis. Our always radiant co host, Portia Collins, is waiting in the wings. And we're here on a mission every week to give you hope and perspective. So, with that being said, Dana, I need some vacation pictures.
You know, I don't mind sharing some. I should say, in case you don't know, for Christmas in 2019, my husband Bob bought me this little guy. This is
Uh,
a stuffed whale shark. Isn't he cute? It was
he's very
a
cute.
simple. He is kind of cute, isn't he? Just imagine him
Yeah.
swimming towards you, Aaron. This was my
Well, I
symbolic
like
gift.
I like it at that size. Yeah. But
You like it at that size. That's not their real
yeah,
size.
right.
For Christmas, Bob bought me a trip to the Caribbean to swim with whale sharks. This has been a bucket list dream of mine. I'm an avid snorkeler, and I was so excited to go. But COVID stole my trip last year.
But
So
COVID, we can say that
this
for lots of
summer,
things, can't we?
well, they're stealing my thunder. I was going to tell you that
Mm.
we got to the remote island of Holbox. Day one, the tour got canceled. Day
Which is
two,
where?
canceled again, high winds. And I was wondering, am I going to get to do it again this year? But day three, the tour guide told us it's still a bit weathery, but if you're willing to brave the waves,
Mm.
he'd take us out. And he said the whale sharks don't really like the waves much more than we do. And we might not find one. But 4 hours later, it's like fishing. The whale sharks don't schedule an appointment with you or anything, Aaron. You got to find them.
Right.
4 hours later, we found this little guy. He was just an itty
I
bitty
think
one.
there's still plenty of thunder because that is an amazing picture. That could be like on National Geographic or something.
I think, I think,
Love
I
it.
think, I think I'll submit it.
Yeah, I think you should. But we've had some debate while you were gone. One, you were gone, and I said, "Oh, she's swimming with the sharks," and somebody said, "Oh, she's swimming with the whales." And then we were like, "Well, she's swimming with the whale sharks. So is she swimming with the sharks? Is she swimming with the fish? Clear it up. You're our expert."
Well, I actually think when the first person saw one of these things in the water, they're like, "Is it a shark or is it a whale?" So they're like, "Whale shark." They're
Love it.
actually fish, the largest in the ocean. Some of them get to be the size of a school bus, which is what I was hoping for. But we only found one that was a juvenile. He was about 8 to 10 feet long. So I don't know, Aaron. I might have to try for a big guy sometime in the future.
A 10-foot long fish feels like a pretty big guy to me. I
Well,
think
I
that
would
would.
like to see, yeah, 35 feet would make me really happy. 8 to 10 feet made me
Oh,
happy, but 35
35 feet
feet,
could swallow you whole. Well, I was
no, but
I was emotionally
their mouths,
invested. They don't.
right. Well, their mouths are 5 feet long, but their little throats are only big enough for plankton. So they're like a few inches.
Oh, good.
I wouldn't
You can't
fit,
fit.
thankfully. No.
Well, we were all kind of emotionally invested in this vacation for you because you've been talking about it for a really long time. And you've
Yeah.
even talked about here on Grounded in the midst of the pandemic when all of us were kind of having to give things up. You talked about surrendering that dream of swimming with the whale sharks.
Yeah. Well, lots of people were traveling last summer, and we could have tried to go last summer, but our particular hotel shut down, and then our airline
Mm.
canceled our flight. We would have had to book a new one. And about that same time, Aaron, we kept seeing people who truly were in need here in the United States because of unemployment. And Bob and I kind of talked, we're like, how can we go on vacation when people are hurting? Now, Bob had put the money aside for the flights and the hotel, but I'd also been saving for food and the other expenses on the trip, and that was adding up to quite a bit. And we sensed that God was asking us to surrender that money to help specifically some single moms that were out of work. And I don't want to appear as if we were epically sacrificial or anything, but we felt God wanted us to let go of the trip to direct that money to single moms out of work. And so that's what we did. And this summer, God blessed me with my whale shark, a little one.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember you talking on the broadcast and telling us because we're friends that you were going to surrender your whale shark money. And I don't have to surrender my dream of swimming with the sharks or the whale sharks or the fish or whatever they are. As you can pick up, It's not on my bucket list, but do you remember, Dana, my 40th birthday? We celebrated that on Grounded. You remember that day?
Yeah. Oh, I do. And Aaron, there was a moment I was snorkeling. I saw eels, parrotfish, manta rays, a lot more than that whale shark. And I was thinking, what a wonder. And I was praising the Lord. And I actually talked to the Lord about your 40th birthday. Remind us about that.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that you were praying for me in the deep. Well, I turned 40, which, I feel like is a big birthday. And we do birthdays big in my family anyway. So I wanted to do that one really big. And I don't know if the Lord put this dream in my heart or it's just something that I've wanted to do for a long time. But I wanted to wake up on my 40th birthday at the base of the redwoods because I wanted to start the second half of my life
Talk about
aware of
big.
my smallness. Yeah, right. Much bigger than a whale shark. And
Yep.
I'm still dreaming about it. Actually, some Grounded viewers have sent me redwood presents. I got a redwood t-shirt from a Grounded viewer. I've gotten postcards. So that just really increases my appetite to see them. So I'm still having to surrender it because I still haven't been to the redwoods. So you know what? We've all had to practice surrender, maybe a little more than usual these past 18 months or so, but I'm not sure I've gotten any better at it. I still mostly surrender kicking and screaming, and I'd like to grow at that probably.
I can identify. Aaron, when I was under the water, I prayed, Lord, give Aaron her redwoods, just the way you've given me this whale shark. And I hope that he still does. But let me say this, honestly, frog in my throat. It's probably from the ocean water.
Happens. Probably so.
I got to say this, though, honestly, giving up whale sharks and redwoods, these are not the most difficult surrenders you'll ever hear about. And
For
if you're
sure.
surrendering something difficult right now, you're probably like, really, Dana, Aaron? We understand these are first world surrenders, like first world problems. But giving up things like these, it's good practice. Every time we surrender, no matter how small it is, we're practicing what God wants us to do because the Christian life is a life of surrender. Jesus has plans for our life, and we want to live in his plan, not our plan. Today's guest has learned the beauty of surrender in a really challenging way. And I know you're going to want to hear from Tracy Lane about what Jesus is teaching her as she parents two children with special needs.
Yeah, Dana, this week I actually am at a camp in Wisconsin, a girls' camp, and every night, man, their hearts are just ready to surrender. Whatever it is we're talking about, they are eager to surrender to the Lord. We're talking about friendship. They're eager to surrender their friendships to the Lord. We're talking about whatever it is. And I have been so inspired by these little girls who are eager to surrender to God and want to be more like them. So surrendering my trip to the Redwoods, I admit it feels like pretty small potatoes compared to Tracy's story. But I do want to become a woman who embraces instead of resists the beauty of surrendering all of my life to Christ. And I know Tracy's going to show us how. So I expect to be challenged this morning and inspired by her like I am being inspired by these sweet little girl campers. But before we hear from Tracy, let's open our Bibles and get grounded in God's word. And for that, we need our girl, Portia.
Hello,
Good
Portia.
Morning. Good morning,
Listen,
friend.
being on the video cast with you today it's worth the price of admission, which is free, admittedly, just to see your phenomenal hair.
Oh, well, thank you. Diana appreciates it. Well, we always want to help you start your week grounded in God's word. And today we want to read a passage from Exodus 2. Exodus, the second chapter. We're going to be looking specifically at verses 1 through 10. And when I think about surrender and learning surrender through the lives of our children, this story is top of mind. Okay, so let me just set the stage here. The Israelites were slaves in Egypt, and Pharaoh, mean old Pharaoh, was not happy with their flourishing numbers. He called for the murder of all the baby boys that were born to Jewish mothers. I mean, just saying that, thinking about that, just let that sit for a minute. He called for the murder of all baby Jewish boys, and he specifically ordered the slave owners to drown the boys in the Nile River. And here's where we meet a woman who was surrendered to God's plan for her life and her babies. So I want you to pick up with me. We're going to be reading starting at verse 1 in chapter 2. And it says, "Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. And she put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank." Now, I just want to pause there. Can you imagine the faith of that mother? What surrender. This Jewish woman put her baby, who we know to be Moses, in the basket and placed him in the very river that was intended to be his grave. And as you hear a powerful story this morning, we want you to be thinking, what is your baby in the basket? What is it that God is asking you to surrender? It might be your children. It might be your marriage. It might be your job or friendship. Or in my case, it might even be your health. What do you, in a sense, need to put in a basket and float down the river and trust that God will take care of it?
And God will take care of it, friend. Listen as I continue reading to hear how God took care of that baby in the basket. And if you can get past your flannel graph memories of this story, you'll realize this sure wasn't what Moses' mom was probably imagining and praying would happen. Let me pick up in Exodus 2, reading in verse 4. "And his sister stood at a distance," that would be Miriam, "to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.'" Can you imagine the fear of Miriam at that moment? Verse 7 says, "Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?'" What quick thinking for this little girl. "And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go.' So the girl went and called the child's mother, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you the wages.' So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, 'I drew him out of the water.'" You know, that mama's surrender of her baby was the beginning of the rescue of an entire nation. The word for basket in the actual Hebrew was the same word used to describe the boat Noah built, ark. It was an ark. Moses' mother's faith surrender, her faith-filled surrender, was an ark for the next generation of Israelites. But she didn't know that. She only knew that she needed to trust God and surrender the baby in the basket. As Tracy prepares to join us, would you share this broadcast? Let others know. I'm sure there's something there in the midst of surrendering. We're going to get some hope and perspective about the things that we need to put in the basket. I'd love to welcome our guest today. Her name is Tracy Lane. She's a writer, a good writer at that. She writes for Family Life Today and on her own blog. She's also a mother with a riveting story of surrender, and it invites all of us to trust the Lord. Hey, Tracy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with y'all.
Hey, if you don't mind, I'm going to dive right in with a really sensitive question because I don't know how to ask it without seeming offensive, at least in my own heart. But when I read your riveting story the other day, I actually thought of Pharaoh's order to have the Jewish baby boys killed in Egypt because he thought those babies had no value. At least they had no value to him. And when I read your story, there were doctors who felt the baby you carried in your womb, I'm imagining it was about 8 years ago, had no value. What did those doctors see, and what did they recommend when you were carrying Annie?
Yes, the doctors didn't think she mattered. At our 20-week ultrasound, they told us that our second baby was going to be a girl, which I was so thrilled. I wanted to have another little girl. And the only problem was that baby had only half of her heart.
Mm,
And so they told us that once she would be outside of my womb, she would be incompatible with life, and that we should, as the doctor said, go ahead and take care of that today.
oh.
So he did tell us it wouldn't be worth carrying her. He said, I wouldn't want to experience what I was going to have to experience. And that is what he recommended, is to terminate the pregnancy.
Mm. Not many women have to hear words like that, words that horrific. And I'm hearing the juxtaposition of the joy that you're having the girl that you dreamed of, and the horror with the doctor suggesting that you abort that precious girl. You chose life. And I want to know, what has life with Annie been like?
Yes, we did choose life, and it was absolutely the right decision. It's not a choice you ever think you're going to have to make in that type of situation. Matt and I wanted to have a baby. It was what we wanted. So it was very shocking to hear her diagnosis and the recommendation
Mm,
from the doctor. But I'm so thankful that Annie has been here with us. Yes, she turned 7 in April. So you're right. It was
mm,
almost 8 years ago. And it's been challenging. There have been a lot of very scary moments. Her health has been down at times and up at times. She's had 3 open heart surgeries. We actually had to move our family across the country to be closer to the care that she needed.
mm.
So, really,
Wow.
Annie's health, we could say Annie's health has dictated so many things in our
Mm,
life, but we can see that it's really what God has used to guide us to where He has us and to give us the
yeah.
story of His grace and His strength. So, Annie's such a joy. I would love for you to meet her. She just
Well, we have
shines
some
light.
pictures of her because she's a beautiful, her face is joyful. There's some
Yes.
pictures of your whole family. I got to ask, my question I'm wondering is, those open heart surgeries, were they able to repair her heart? Does she have the rest of a heart now? Or is she still
She,
operating on less of a heart?
right. She still only has half of a heart.
Wow.
So it's really miraculous what they can do. They just make the right side of her heart work for her whole body. So it's obviously not nearly as efficient as your
Right.
heart or mine. But I'm so thankful that God gave wisdom to the doctors and that there are just these wild medical interventions that can be done to give a vibrant life to our sweet little girl.
And here she is, 7.5 years later, her heart beating, half a heart beating against the doctor's recommendations. All right, fast forward to 2020. What a year. We're at the height of the pandemic. You're pregnant again and at an ultrasound appointment alone because it's the middle of the pandemic. Was there apprehension about that baby's heart? And how did it turn out?
Yes. So you can see that there's a little bit of a gap between Annie and our baby Davis, because I never wanted to have another baby, because how could I ever go into another ultrasound again and
Oh,
wonder what I would hear? So the act of us saying yes to another baby, Matt was pretty persistent, but I never said yes to him. It was a huge act of surrender to God, that we
wow.
could trust the size of our family and the health of our family to Him. So, yeah, we got pregnant with our third, and they scheduled an ultrasound at 20 weeks looking at his heart because of Annie's heart. I
Yeah.
actually wasn't worried, because it's kind of funny the way that you make these deals in your head with God. Like, oh, He wouldn't do that to us again, right?
Right.
So, very naive to think, you can kind of bargain that way. But at the 20-week ultrasound appointment, I had Matt and actually Audrey and Annie on FaceTime, since no one could
Mm,
go with me. And the ultrasound tech said, "Oh, his heart looks good. He has a healthy heart. That's great." So I hung up the FaceTime thinking we were done,
Yeah.
but we weren't done. And
Oh,
I've been in those rooms enough times to know when something isn't going right. So I wasn't
yeah.
sure what it was, but I understood that it wasn't going to be good. So after the scan, I actually had to go into the doctor's office who should have been there, but because of the precautions, he was at his home in the safety and called me and he said, I don't even know how to tell this to a mother like you, but your son has spina bifida.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, again, were you faced with a decision? I mean,
Yes.
it's
So
knowing your heart, you didn't have a decision, but did the doctors also make a recommendation that time?
he did. He told us that Davis likely would never walk. He would likely
Mm,
be significantly cognitively impaired. And since my husband wasn't there with me, he said, why don't you go home? Tell your husband what I said. Don't Google anything yet,
mm.
but let's have a Zoom call this afternoon and I'll recommend what you should do. And of course, his first recommendation for what he calls treatment was to terminate.
Wow.
Mhm.
What did you and your husband say to that? What'd you do?
Yeah, so it's interesting because with Annie in that room, when the doctor suggested it, I was the first one with an immediate no. I was
Mm.
carrying her, I could feel her kicking. This time with Davis, it was like I felt like I didn't have the fight anymore.
Oh,
But
wow.
thankfully, Matt still did. And
Mm.
he was the immediate, no, no, that's not an option for us. And of course, I agreed with him. I would want nothing else, but I didn't have the strength to say at that time. And God gave it to him. So it was actually a really sweet journey for our marriage, too, to just be able to see what God would give each of us during each different day, parenting these two children, plus Audrey, who's our healthy child. And He really has just given us what we needed every moment of every day.
I love how you see the treasures in the surrender. How's that sweet baby doing? How old is he and what's his health journey been like?
Yeah, he's 9 months and he is adorable. Yeah, there he is when he's
He
having
is
the kidney
adorable.
ultrasound. I cannot imagine life without him. I don't know why I never wanted a third baby because he's such a joy. And I mean, he really does complete our family. So the day he was born at the Children's Hospital. He spent a week there where you can see us outside the NICU. That was last week at his checkup. But when he was born, I didn't get to meet him. He went straight
Oh.
into the hands of a neurosurgeon to
Mm,
remove the big bubble on his back. And that was a
mm.
very difficult day for us. Yeah, you want to meet your baby, you want to hold your baby. And I didn't even see him before the surgeon did. I met him later that night.
Wow.
But God has just healed him so much. His prognosis at this point is very, very positive. He's crawling, he's pulling to stand, which is just
Praise
like,
the Lord. Oh,
yes,
that's
yes, it's
beautiful.
so fun. And
You
yeah, right
know,
now,
I love the faith that's still in your heart, in your mind. This isn't easy. Even just last night, we were going to record this earlier, but we had to cancel that because you had sick kids through the night. And sick kids for you is probably a very different journey than sick kids for the rest of us. But you look beautiful today. Your spirit is bright. And what a life lesson you are for all of us, a living life lesson in surrender. I wonder what you'd say to a woman listening right now who's facing surrender, maybe in areas of her marriage or her health, but it could be in the health of her children or her grandchildren. What encouragement would you give to her today?
yeah, surrender is hard. I think
Mhm.
it's fair to say that. And that's a big part of encouragement I would give because sometimes in the faith community, we want it to seem really easy, like if we
Yeah.
just trusted more or if we just prayed harder. But really, surrendering what we want and our dreams for our life, it's very difficult. But I think it's important to remember who you're surrendering to. At
Mm,
times, I felt like I was having to surrender to different diagnoses from my kids, but that's really not what I was surrendering to. When we surrender, we're surrendering to a good God, and He cares
wow.
about us,
Yes.
and He knows what we need. And I
Yeah.
think that's for me, if I keep that in the forefront, Again, surrender is never easy, but if I keep that in the forefront, it makes the surrender worth it. And I'm not alone in the surrender. I have that good God asking me to surrender, walking with me through the surrender. And He gives
Yeah.
us what we need. We can
I love
trust
that.
Him.
That's two good pieces of advice. One, remember that surrender is not easy. You have permission for it to be hard. It wouldn't be surrender if it wasn't hard, right? And
Right.
no matter what you're facing, it's okay to say, Jesus, this is so hard. I can't believe that I'm having to do this again. And the second thing, remember what or who you're surrendering to. It's not that circumstance, it's not that sickness. It's trust in the Lord that you're surrendering to. Now, I imagine your story is probably like mine. When the Lord asked me to surrender, I surrender, it's all over, and my heart is perfect thereon, and I never have to re-surrender again because it's all settled with the Lord, right? No, it doesn't work that way. So, what do you do on those days when you're like, I feel like I'm starting over today. I have to re-surrender to this.
Well, I will say I think that's every day. So,
Mm.
especially with our kids, it is very hard because every day demands something different from me than it would if that wasn't the case. But what I
Yeah.
do is just ground myself in who He is. I mean, I'd like to meditate on scripture and just think about Psalm 56. There's the verse, when I'm afraid, I will trust in you. And I'm afraid to surrender every day again, but I just remember who I'm trusting in. And really, I look back on God's faithfulness. The surrender has been okay. It's never failed me yet because, again, I'm surrendering to Him. He hasn't failed me. And if I can focus on that, I can surrender this day, this moment over and over to that good God.
I love that, Tracy. Wow. Maybe, as you say, Psalm 56, right? Psalm
Hmm.
56, when I am afraid, I will trust in you. That's the verse you probably need, or the chapter you need to dig into on the days when you're feeling like you have to start all over with your surrender again. Tracy, you know what I hear from your heart? It's an understanding that we can surrender all of our lives to Jesus, every bit, even really difficult ongoing circumstances like having a daughter with half a heart, or those nights when the babies are sick and they're throwing up and we just have to have the energy to make it through. We can surrender to the Lord in those things because He's promised us good things and we can trust Him. Thanks for being with us today, Tracy. God bless you.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I need a reminder to surrender and trust God every single day, just as you just heard Tracy say. Nancy DeMoss Walgemuth has been a friend that God's used to help me live more surrendered to Him. And we've got a short video clip of Nancy teaching at a True Woman conference on walking with the Lord in miserable circumstances. Let's watch together.
Sometimes our circumstances are just the natural byproduct of crummy choices we've made. But sometimes you've been walking with the Lord. You've been waiting on Him. You've been trusting Him. You've been trying to serve Him. You've been trying to be faithful to Him. And yet you still have these really miserable circumstances. Paul had been a faithful servant of the Lord. Now he's at the end of his life and ministry. And you'd think maybe he'd have a chance here on this earth to get some of the reward of his ministry. But he understood the reward is not here and now. The reward is there and then. In the meantime, he was going to have God's view of his circumstances and his life. He was a servant of the Lord. Whatever it was that God had for him, he was going to receive.
Phew, I'm still teary from hearing from Tracy. I keep having to blot my eyes. I got what I came for today, which is that not to focus on what I am surrendering, but to focus on who I am surrendering to. I can surrender it all to Him. He's so good. So love, love, love hearing from Tracy. Hey, it wouldn't be grounded if we didn't point you to what we call the good stuff, and that is tools to help you stay grounded after you're finished watching this episode or listening to this episode. We know there will be opportunities for you to need to stay grounded. So the first thing we want to point you to this week is something we're calling the kindness challenge. We're actually going to do a whole episode of Grounded on this coming up, and man, it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. But we just think kindness can matter. kindness can make a dent in the darkness, is what I keep saying. And so we are challenging people to be kind in the month of July and beyond. And Portia and we're going to do a special live video every weekday in July at 10 a.m. Eastern. So if you feel like you need more than the Portia and Aaron you got on Grounded, we're going to give you some more. I hear Emmy in the background. We'll probably have Emmy in some of them. So 10 a.m. Eastern, you're going to hear a short devotional on kindness. We've got some great Bible teachers lined up. And every day we're going to give you a simple idea for how to show kindness to others. So join us on the kindness challenge. That's the first thing we want to tell you about.
Yeah, I've really been working with Emmy lately on kindness. She's an only child, and so she's
She doesn't like to share.
Oh, not at all, not at all. And so we have a friend of ours. Her daughter has been coming over to hang out with us, and it's been kind of tough trying to teach her kindness and sharing. And so I need this. I need to get recharged and get some more resources under my tool belt so that I can help my daughter. And we want to recommend 2 blog posts to you. First is one from a mom of a special needs child. This is written by Sheila Gosney. Her son has autism, and in this blog, she shares some profound lessons that she's learned on her journey. Drop a link to that. The second blog post that we want to point you in the direction to go check out, it gives you some practical ideas for ministering to special needs moms. Okay, so think about it. We have mamas who need you to lift their arms up to support them. And so I'm sure there is a woman in your church, in your neighborhood, in your family who is caring for a special needs child, and she could use your encouragement. And so this blog post will give you some simple ideas for how to love on her.
Well, friends, thank you for being with us today. We have so enjoyed considering this topic of surrendering to the Lord. And I wonder if you'd leave a comment. We love praying for you. We have a whole prayer team for Grounded that loves praying for you. Leave a comment and tell us, what is it that the Lord is calling you to surrender right now? Remember, it can be small or it can be big. Everything is practicing. It's good to practice the skills God calls us to live out, and He calls us to live surrendered lives. So even those little things matter. Now that I got the sharks off my bucket list, I have new things the Lord's asking me to surrender. He's been asking me for about 18 months to surrender my beloved home and farm, and it's a new surrender every day. What is He asking you to surrender, whether it's practice or the big things? Tell us. Is it hopes? Is it your dreams? Is it your expectations? Aaron, Portia, what's the Lord asking you to surrender right now? How is He teaching you in this area?
Well, I've got a friendship that's on the rocks, and it's hard because I want to deal with it. I want to have the conversation. I want to hug each other. I want to move on. And the person on the other side of the relationship isn't there yet. So I am daily having to surrender it to the Lord, trust that the Lord's going to bring reconciliation in the right time. And it's been a tough path of surrender, frankly.
So surrendering relationships. I don't know that anything is more difficult, other than maybe the health of a child, than surrendering relationships. What about you, Portia? You're surrendering that child to the Lord right now, aren't you? I saw that. I saw you look over there with that mama bear look like.
I'm like, definitely my baby. And just being a mother is the most beautiful thing, but it is something you don't get a playbook for it. You don't get anything. And so it's something that I have to trust God to teach me how to do every day. And I think the second thing would be my health, just surrendering and trusting that God knows what He's doing. And so I'm going to hush now because I'm about to cry.
It's okay if you do, because remember what Tracy told us. It's okay. Surrender is hard. And when you cry, Portia, when your tears come out, that doesn't mean you're not surrendering. It just means you're acknowledging that surrender is hard. But I hope that you and everyone listening to my voice right now, remember, we're not surrendering to the health diagnosis. We're not surrendering to the rocky friendship. We're not surrendering to losing the home of our dreams. We're surrendering to a God who loves us and has a good plan. Surrender
And a God who
and trust.
surrendered his life for us, right? So we can
true.
follow his lead. Hey, we have got such a great July planned. I can't believe
We
it is
do.
July. It is. But we've
I don't mean
got
to
quite
brag,
the
but we
lineup on
do,
Grounded.
Yeah,
I
don't want
know.
to brag
It's
about it, but we
amazing.
so do. I'm so excited.
Well, we can brag about it because I feel like the Lord lined these guests up. I'm
Yes.
excited about every episode. So Ruth Cho Simons is going to be with us next week. You have probably seen her stunning artwork around. She's not here to talk about art next week. We're going to talk about how to use these lazy summer months. That's what they're called. They're not all that lazy at my house, but how can we use them for intentional spiritual formation, especially in our families? I can't wait.
I'm excited. I love Ruth. She is so sweet. I think she's a mom of all boys too. So
She
you
is.
guys got something in common. So I can't wait. But guys at home, don't forget about the kindness challenge. Like, I'm super excited about that, and I hope you are too. It's gonna be right here at 10 a.m. Eastern time every weekday.
Coming up in just a few minutes. Friends, let's start a kindness revolution right here on social media. Boy, do we need it there. And let's wake up together with hope next week on Grounded.